Welcome, everyone, to the Dog Gut Summit. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Woodley. I'm a holistic, integrative veterinarian and founder of The Natural Pet Doctor, and I have a huge passion for all things gut health. What we find is that a lot of the conditions that we treat and that we see every single day with our patients end up actually being a gut health problem. And that's why I'm really excited to host this summit and show you where all those interconnections are, and most importantly, how you can identify them, even test for them, and heal those gut health problems that may be manifesting as skin issues, behavior problems, ear infections, all those not fun recurring health problems that keep you going back and forth to the vet. So there's a strong connection, and we're going to be talking all about that through the next couple days with the Dog Gut Summit. So I hope you're as excited as I am, and make sure you tune in every single day. But most importantly, I'm really excited about the two guests that I have joining me on this amazing kickoff panel, because they're doing some really incredible things in the vet industry to help your pets and specifically help optimize your dog's gut health. So I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Susan Bohrer and Dr. Betsy Redmond. Now, Dr. Susan Bohrer is a seasoned small animal veterinarian from California with 15 years of expertise in traditional Chinese medicine and food therapy. Witnessing the transformative effects of whole food meals on her patients, she's pioneered Chi-Dog, delivering balanced cooked meals for dogs nationwide. She staunchly believes in an integrative approach to canine nutrition, living by the principle that food is the first medicine. Next is Dr. Betsy Redmond, and she has a rich background in clinical research and nutrition, and she's the co-founder and chief science officer at Innovative Pet Lab. Leveraging her 2 decades of experience, she focuses on developing accessible health tests at Innovative Pet Lab, helping pet owners better understand their pet's health. Based in Atlanta, she's committed to advancing pet wellness through specific scientific innovation. So thanks so much for joining me, Dr. Redmond and Dr. Susan. It's truly a pleasure to have you here with us and being a part of the Dog Gut Summit.
Absolutely. I'm
Thanks
glad
for
to be
having
here.
me. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot, right? I think we can all agree there's a lot going on with gut health, and it can be connected to a lot of different things in our dog patients that we see every single day. I would love for you, Susan, to start with talking a little bit more about kind of what you do, because it's a big part of my practice and things that have really turned around a lot of my patients when they've been dealing with these frustrating gut health or skin issues. And I want you to talk a little bit more about your traditional Chinese veterinary medicine and how you've approached that with creating your own business.
Well, so like you, Katie, I've been using integrative medicine and using as part of my practice because I'm in Southern California for many years. And I do Western medicine as well as acupuncture and herbs from a Chinese medicine perspective. And so that's been really great to have that integrative approach. But what was so game changing for me as a practitioner is when I learned Chinese medicine food therapy and started teaching. I began for years teaching home cooked recipes for my clients and balancing them and teaching them and having my clients cook the food based on Chinese medicine food therapy, which is a concept of using food similar to how we use herbs. So we know that herbs have certain effects on the body. So whole foods can be used in the same way. And really it's obviously the foundation of health is what we put in our bodies every day is that food. And what I couldn't believe was how much improvement I saw in my patients. I mean, that was I wished I had taken before and after pictures. And I kept saying that. I should have taken a before picture, but I didn't want to jinx it. But these dogs were just, were just improving so much when they got off of the processed kibble and on whole foods. It really made me stop to think. And then, of course, I wanted to do whole food therapy for every patient who came in the door. And because I was just we can talk about all your health issues, which are important and real, but we got to get to the basis of where this is coming from, especially for so much chronic inflammation that we see. So basically, we use whole foods in the sense that we have certain, imbalances in the body, right? We have dogs who seem a little too hot or dogs who seem too cold, which is similar to inflammation, but a little different. But basically Chinese medicine says, if you're too hot, we're going to feed you cooler foods. If you're too cold, we're going to feed you warming foods. And so that's kind of the basis of food therapy. And so we've translated that into Western medicine foods with Chi-Dog is kind of how we did it. But it's the foundation is getting a lot of these dogs off of kibble and onto real food, because we know processed food is pro-inflammatory. So all this chronic inflammation that we're seeing in our dogs, we really feel like, I found a tremendous benefit with whole foods. So that's kind of how I fell into food therapy and just, so focused on food.
Yeah, I love that. And it's really neat. And it makes so much sense when you start thinking about the energetics
Yeah.
because you're spot on. Like herbal medicine, herbs have energy, everything has energy. And so being able to tap into like nature's resources to help heal the body is just incredible.
Right. Because I
We
mean,
use a
honestly, you have to eat.
Yeah, you do
We
have
have
to.
we have to eat something.
Yes. I mean, that's where, food is medicine, and it can either be the safest form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. And
100.
it's so important. And, I love what you've done because a lot of the worries that people have too is like, how am I going to make sure it's balanced? And
Yes.
also too, I don't have the time to do it. So that's why I love Chi Dog and sending like clients there where they can order it, which is really, really nice. But it also too is fun when you have so many, like, great resources to learn about the different energetics on your website,
Mhm.
at Dog, and you can start implementing that and thinking about that even with the treats that you're using for your dogs too.
Right.
Is this a warming protein? Is it a cooling protein? And it's really fun too. I teach clients how to look at, like, the tongue and the colors and just be more aware of, like, what's going on with their pets, and they actually find it really fun, and it helps deepen that relationship with them too.
100%. I say if you can cook a little bit for your dog, there's just something beautiful about giving them real food, and it's just really it feels good, and especially like we're talking about now with this gut health summit, and how much GI inflammation and chronic distress there is. It's just being able to heal it is really it feels really good.
Yeah, and, with the processed food, there's so many studies that are coming out now, to show us that processed food diets are actually contributing to things like more inflammation, more oxidative stress in the body, and
Mhm.
it's actually not helping that microbiome. So those thousands or those trillions of different microorganisms that make up your pet's gut, it's actually not feeding the right ones. It's not creating diversity. And that's where fresh food diets can be really, really helpful and really powerful at optimizing even that microbiome. And like you said, Susan, actually healing the issue versus just covering it up.
Right, because in
And
Western medicine, we don't have anything to really go with, but Chinese medicine has been feeding food, for thousands of years.
yeah, there's something there, right?
Yes.
So when we kind of like look at what's been working and follow that, it usually makes sense. And then there's a clue there. So I
Yeah,
love
it's kind of a back to basics.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes along with, I mentioned the research and all of that with the microbiome and the foods and how the food therapy is helping. But that also leads me like Dr. Redmond, like you guys are doing something much different on the pet side. Now you've been in the human gut health side for a very long time. And these tests have been around for a long time. I can tell you they're not the first things to be tested when you go to a conventional human gastroenterologist, because I have personal experience in that. However, I'm super excited for you to kind of delve more into like the research that you're doing and some of the neat functional medicine tests that you've been able to develop.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with diet, and we'll see, the impact of diet on our testing. But I worked in the human side, and when you start looking into it, it's a lot of it was done. All the research was done in animals,
Mm.
mostly dogs, because they're so agreeable. So they know a lot of these things that are beneficial. That you changes you can make, and testing with testing, but there are certain types of testing that we look at. So all of our tests are stool tests, so they're easy to collect, but they're telling you exactly what's going on in the gut. So we can look at inflammation. We can look at level of secretory IgA. We can look at digestion and detox, which can also give an idea like gut bacteria. We can look at the gut lining and the health of the gut lining by looking at like zonulin, and then we can see reaction. We do one food reaction. We do antigliadin just to see if they're, pets are having a reaction to that. But we like to throw a wide net and see, what's going on in all the different areas.
And I think that's really important too. We hear leaky gut, the term's
Mhm.
thrown out around a lot. And essentially it means that we have permeability issues where that gut it's getting inflamed and starting to separate. And we have food, bacteria, toxins passing through into the bloodstream. They overstimulate the immune system or create an adverse or inappropriate immune response, even though it's doing what it's supposed to. We just don't like the results that happen afterwards, right? The symptoms that occur. And now it's nice to be able to have tests to see, do we have an inflamed gut lining? Do we actually have a leaky gut problem? And then you mentioned too, so many pets are on kibble processed diets, and they could actually be reacting to it and not showing symptoms yet. And that's what the power of like functional medicine, like proactive testing, can really help uncover. I know you've been doing quite a bit of like clinical trials too with supplements and other companies. Can you give a little bit of insight? I know some of them were with kitties, but there's also, I know you're doing quite a bit out there. Can you give a little insight in some of the research findings that you've seen just from like food and even supplementation that's supporting and improving gut health?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did do a big study with cats and, found cats that had a lot of symptoms, and we correlated symptoms to levels of the tests and then treating and the changes it makes. And that was, pretty successful. And we see the same, in dogs. We've gone to shelters and looked at shelter animals, and their levels tend to be a lot higher, or their levels identified. There's more inflammation. There's more permeability. Their diet's probably not as good, and they're probably under a lot of stress too, which makes it worse. So I think we're trying to look at what's going on and what's the big picture. So it's not every, dog is going to, it has these symptoms and we want to test and see what it is. That's one thing. But some dogs don't have any symptoms. They're just like people. They may not know they have IBD until, they have some crisis, but they didn't, suddenly just wake up and have it. It builds up.
Yep.
So by checking to see where on the spectrum you are with these different markers, like what is the level of inflammation? How permeable is the gut?
Yep. I always say, you're on that spectrum. We're either moving toward optimal health or we're moving essentially towards death, right? And we're all constantly fluctuating. And depending on your emotional health, your environmental health, your toxin load, the food we're putting in, genetics can play, they're
Right.
there to like load the gun, right? They're not pulling the trigger. But it's going to be constantly moving. And so I think it's interesting you mentioned the shelter dogs, super stressful environment, lower quality food. And, they're doing the best they can to take care of these animals. But we do see that, if you are rescuing a pet, maybe it is worth doing some of these tests to see like what is the baseline that my pet's at so that we can make adjustments and improvements. So we're not just assuming that things are nice and healthy and then down the road something happens. Like you have family come over for the holidays, right? And then all of a sudden now you've got IBD. And it was like, no, that was actually occurring. We just didn't know because they were coping until they couldn't. And so that's really, really important. And it's nice now to have tests to help us versus just guessing. The other thing I find too with a lot of my clients is that a lot of times you're guessing on supplements, right? You're following like principles of like how to heal. And you're like, do I stay on this? Do we keep them on this? And a lot of people end up with like supplement graveyards or spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars every month. And so it's nice to also be able to test like, wow, that food is working. Those supplements are working. We healed that inflammation. I don't need this supplement anymore. And then you can maintain the diet and the food as the base. And then you're not spending all this money every month. And then you can do those tests, these proactive gut health tests, like once a year, just to make sure we haven't kind of gone backwards. So that's what I love about that. And I know you're going to be talking more about that during the gut summit. And I know, Susan, you're going to be talking more about TCVM and food therapy and how that really relates to healing the gut. So I'm super excited to hear those presentations. Now,
Absolutely. And I want to make one comment, Katie. You know how you talked about genes and how kind of that's sort of the thing that, what I love and what was really striking to me, and I talk about it in the summit, is in Western medicine, we just go, genes are genes, that's it. You're born with what you got. And in Chinese medicine, yes, that's true. They kind of, call it your gene, which is almost like your personality and your genes kind of mixed together. But the only way in Chinese medicine we have of improving that gene, of improving our genes, and from a Western perspective, is food, right? Like we talk about the postnatal gene. So if you have, so we're thinking about that dog, like, I'll have clients be like, I had a dog when I was growing up and they lived to 18 and they ate kibble and they were healthy. And we go, God bless that dog. It had great genes. Great genes. Right? But if the dog is, always your, the chronic deficiency or chronic illness or just always sensitive, lots of GI issues, that dog just doesn't have a strong gene or strong genes. And the only way we have of really fortifying them is with our diet. So that can kind of really, let's sort of, shows how important diet is to our well-being.
Yeah, it's nutrigenomics and epigenetics. And
Yeah.
it's, there's so much science on it now, which is really, really neat to like back up once
Yeah.
again what, traditional Chinese medicine is known for
Right.
thousands of years,
the
right?
connection
Now we
between-
need the science and now
Yes.
it's okay to use it,
Between
right?
gut and
recommend it.
skin. I know, I laugh because I've been saying that for years, the gut and skin connection. And everyone's like, there's no such thing. And now we understand it.
You've got skin access. So actually, I'm going to be talking about that during the summit. So it's,
Right.
everything's interconnected. And yes, it's a great reminder. Food is important. Testing has a place. So we know what we're treating and that will help us how to treat it and how long to continue treatment. So I love all those points. Now, in terms of, let's kind of shift a little bit. We've been talking already a little bit about like the impact of diet on gut health. We all agree it has a huge impact. But in your experience, like how significant is that impact of diet on a dog's gut health? And what would you say are some of the key dietary elements that pet parents should really focus on? And I'll kick it over to you, Dr. Susan, first, and then I'll go to Dr. Redmond.
Well, we have a saying in Chinese medicine that's, you might remember this. It says, if you're unsure, support the earth, which is kind of like our way to treat something. If we're not sure what's going on, think about earth element, which is essentially your gut, right? Your food, your digestion, because we can have serious disease. And I see it frequently, serious disease, cancers, really, advanced dogs who are not doing well. And it's not that I ignore what their underlying condition is, but if they're not eating and their gut is not, like literally eating well, then nothing matters. All that matters, you got to, so from a short-term daily basis, that's, just how important gut is. Anybody could fast for a day and know exactly how that feels, that really matters. And I think a lot of times when we have pet parents who have dogs with chronic GI issues, there's a lot of fear, right? Because you've gone through so much. And I know you and I had a patient who that we both worked with that was just going in and out of the hospital, and it's so scary. And so there's a lot of fear associated with that when we have to feed our dogs. But that's why I love that by at least shifting our focus from, here are my 5 processed dog food options, right? Shifting our focus to, here's the whole foods that I can feed my dog, right? Because there's some fear there too. But what's toxic? What's not? No, all that kind of stuff is part of the fears that a lot of our pet parents have. But being able to see food as an option for our dogs, which for some pet parents is new, that I think is really helpful for these dogs who have lots of chronic GI issues. Because I would say sort of the most important things to think about when you're thinking about what to feed your dog or how to approach their GI issues is, one, processed food is pro-inflammatory. Like we know that, right? That has been well studied. I'm sure Dr. Redmond knows this has been very well studied in human medicine. We all know it. It has just not been well studied in our dogs and cats. So they are mammals. They're still, if they're eating processed food, they're eating food that's pro-inflammatory. And in Chinese medicine, we say you're putting heat into the body, right? We call pro-inflammatory. So you're eating hot and dry food, right? And then you come up with hot and dry problems. And so that means chronic inflammation. So I would say one is the processed food is pro-inflammatory. And the other sort of big tenet that I talk about and think about, is how much more can I get whole foods in that dog's diet, right? We always, we know for our health, eat the rainbow, we know we should be eating whole food. We just, a lot of times, and I'm always, especially when I talk to Western trained veterinarians who have no TCM or integrative background, they still are not understanding that processed food is, kibble and dry and canned food is processed. So even that is a leap for some. So really kind of getting people to open the refrigerator door a little bit, be able to see whole foods as an option. They can even go on our website and just look at the ingredients and be able to see, these are things that I could feed my dog. Those can be, I'm hopeful that that can be sort of a way to open the door. Because for me in my practice, even as a dog owner, right, but especially as a veterinarian, it was game changing for me to be able to see the benefits when they get on whole foods.
Yeah. I remember it's been years now with Finn, our German Shepherd. He had a brain tumor and it manifested as seizures. And, coming from, I got him as a puppy in vet school. So, what I do, I put him on German Shepherd kibble, like,
Yeah.
like, oh, this is the best for him. Not
We used to
knowing.
get it free. We used
Yeah,
to get
right.
we used to get it free,
Exactly. I
yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
well, I'm poor, so this
Yeah,
works
we got
really
free
well.
expired
Like,
dog food. I loved it.
yeah. But little did I know, because that's not what we were taught, is that there was a better way. And when, unfortunately, he got sick, I was so grateful. I was already on this journey learning about, the food and herbs and all the things, because that is what gave him an extra year of amazing quality of life with us, versus we wouldn't have had any time with him when we diagnosed him. And so
Yeah.
fresh food was a huge part of that. And I really enjoyed making his meals for him, and just being aware of, what are some of the energetics. Those were things I didn't even know way back then, that now is really fun to watch and see animals like pick and choose and self-select what their bodies also need. And so it's really, once you become more in tune with that and start becoming aware and learning, and also giving yourself grace to just try, because it is
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah.
It's really fun to see them, like, their skin changes, the coat changes first. That's
Love
always
the
the
coat
first
changes.
thing that people
Yeah.
see, like, wow, their coat changed. And
It's
then
all
their
those subjective things that you can't really, their eyes are brighter, they're more active, the coat.
yeah,
So I don't tout them too strongly because it's so subjective, but you hear it. I'm sure you
yeah,
hear it from clients all the time.
yeah, it's fantastic. And so it's definitely, I love what you said, like, the processed food is pro-inflammatory. How can we shift that, adding in more fresh foods into the diet? And feeding our animal in front of us versus the condition is
Yeah.
really, really important, and a big part of what I've gained from the Chinese medicine side, and help too. I don't need to wait
Absolutely.
for a diagnosis to be able to use these principles for the animals to help them start healing.
Absolutely. When I have, like, we talked about the fear that fear is when you have a dog that's got lots of GI problems. If the dog's healthy and great, then, it could be fun. But if it's the dog who's had issues that can be difficult. So I guess I would just want to, mention that, and I'm sure dog owners are thinking about this, well, because we hear it. What about balance? What about balance? You know what I mean? It's big. And so I would suggest that, if you wanted to sort of start tonight, or this afternoon with your dog, you would be able to just do a little topper, right, of some whole foods, some cooked, gentle whole foods. And then as you move forward, you can either decide to truly balance a home cooked diet. We've got the vitamins and minerals on our website, or what's easier, and most people tend to want a little support, then like our diets and other whole food diets are balanced. They have the vitamins and minerals. So you're not missing anything. A lot of people keep thinking, well, don't I need the kibble for something? Do I need a little bit of it? You know what I mean? Like, it's really, you don't need any of it. You can
Yeah.
balance it, but whole foods. There's no benefit to that processed stuff.
Yeah. And that's why it's full of synthetic vitamins and minerals.
Yeah.
When we look at it, like,
Yeah.
it's like taking a multivitamin every day, when in reality you could eat fresh whole foods and variety and not necessarily need that.
Right.
So there's a lot that goes with that, that we won't necessarily get into in this conversation.
Yeah.
But
It's a whole other can of worms.
yes, exactly. But I'd love to hear, Dr. Redmond, in terms of, like, some of the things that you're seeing in terms of diet and gut health, because you're seeing the, like, testing side with these changes. What are some of the key dietary elements that pet parents should really focus on if they're trying to optimize their dog gut health?
Yeah, I mean, the things we notice and that are related to the test are anti-inflammatory type foods, So again, if kibble's pro-inflammatory, you want stuff that's anti-inflammatory. And it's usually not enough to just pull out what's pro-inflammatory. You need to provide some anti-inflammatories, whether it's, blueberries or a supplement or a specific dog food, So I think looking at those types of things can be really helpful. Um, and seeing what they need. We think about the food that they're getting and also how they're getting it, the timing of meals and things like that. But we see, dogs get better, kind of the progression. You can make changes and we see inflammation come down. You can make changes and we can see a reduction in intestinal permeability.
Mm. Yes, I love that because that truly is a testament to what you're giving and seeing those changes. Usually things don't change if you don't change anything. It's a definition of crazy to expect a difference.
Right.
And so I also love that you brought up the timing of meals because it's not just necessarily about the food, but also thinking about, okay, can we rest the gut? Can we do, intermittent fasting is a hot topic in the human health side. And there are some more information coming out on like dogs and whether they can, and they can fast. They're built for fasting. So if we're constantly giving them treats and snacks and things throughout the day, we have to think, are we allowing that gut to rest and allow those cleansing waves to go through to support a healthy microbiome and an ecosystem? So I love that you brought that up because I hadn't even thought of it. And that's a big part is, all these things around feeding and diet that can make a huge difference for our pets.
Yeah. And I think, the things we think about are just stress in general. People do better if things happen the same time each day. And so do dogs. I mean, they're mammals. I mean, I think the best example of that is coffee. If you drink coffee every day and you don't drink it one day, you get a headache. That's partly because your body has secreted all these enzymes to go ahead and dilate your blood vessels because they know the coffee's going to constrict it. It does that before you drink the coffee. So, your body gets so in tune with your routine, and that happens with pets too. Okay, they're up, they're brushing their teeth, we're going to get breakfast, so I think that, that kind of stuff, and it lowers stress, which helps with digestion. And I
Definitely.
think also with good nutrition and getting the right food, you can see with testing, is that the right food? If somebody tests and everything looks great, likely that's the right food for them.
Mhm.
Definitely.
About timing and diet, because I know a lot that is something that we talk about a lot with our dogs who are having lots of GI issues. I don't know, Dr. Redmond, what you guys have found, or because I talk a lot about in Chinese medicine, one of the main tenets of for when there is a spleen qi deficiency, so that would mean like a digestion issue. Not all digestion issues, but some of them we would do think about small, frequent meals to help heal the gut, or to help that dog, be able to process that food better. So I talk a lot about the little dog because it happens in big dogs, but it's super common in these little dogs where Dr. Woodley's like, yes, when they wake up in the morning and they vomit bile. And so we'll say, oh, that's, Western medicine, stomach acid, Chinese medicine, stomach heat. And then we say a little small snack, right? Before, right before right after they wake up. So they're not going with this long, fasting intermittently. Okay. But for these little dogs, sometimes those long bouts of not eating just gets their stomach acid going, and then they can get kind of a cycle. So I usually tell clients, small frequent meals when there's lots of GI problems. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yes, definitely. One of the other things too I found, and it goes to the timing, is that if they start anticipating meals, it can lead to more like that bilious vomiting. They're vomiting up that yellow bile every morning. And
Mhm.
so sometimes changing those types of timing of meals too, then that way their body's not expecting the food right away. But the small meals definitely make a big difference if there's a pet dealing with like acid reflux and the vomiting.
And it can
100%.
be hard, yeah, because a lot of times people are like, "Well, the food, something's wrong with the food," or "What I did yesterday didn't work because they're vomiting this morning." And it's so key. If they're vomiting bile, this is an empty stomach. This is different from, you know what I mean, vomiting food.
Yeah. Definitely. I think also too, it leads right into our like next topic is like managing like common gut issues. And so we're talking about a common gut health problem. This is where acid reflux and things like that are a big problem. And also vomiting, diarrhea, huge problems. Diarrhea, GI upset, IBD. It's like the number one thing that I see every single day. I'm sure you
Yeah,
both agree. Like, it's probably why they
absolutely.
reach out to Innovative Pet Lab for testing. Like, they're so sensitive to everything, like you're saying, Susan. And, what are we just talked a little bit about some of the strategies for managing, the bile vomiting that's so
Mhm.
common. What are some of the other common strategies you use for specific situations or symptoms?
Well, the biggest one I get is, and goes back to what we talked about, kind of the fear of what to feed, is the clients are often thinking for whatever issue, and it's usually pancreatitis, but there's a lot, and more I find the client thinks they need a low fat diet, right? So, and that's hard because when you say cook something, they're like, well, I ate something low fat, right? And so how do I cook? But it has to be this crude fat protein on my guaranteed analysis, because we're used to thinking like that. We're used to buying the dog, the bag of kibble and looking at the number and then going, yes, this is good, or no, this is bad. The nice thing is, so one thing I would say is when we talk about managing, how can we manage? The nice thing is when you start and when you're talking about whole foods, you can think low fat. That is lean meat, right? So chicken, turkey, egg, those are lean meats that we've all got in our fridge. We've all got accessible at the grocery store, so we can get good quality, right? And that way, and then if the client says to me, well, my vet, or I think we should have lower fat than turkey. Egg is pretty much our lowest fat protein. And beyond that, you're no longer feeding meat, right? If you want lower fat, you're feeding carb. Because all those processed dog foods, I'm sure you guys know, when they say low fat, they might as well put high carb, because that's how you make low fat. Because, you're going to you're feeding meat, carb, veggies, right? That's it. So what I try to tell clients is to translate things like low fat, low protein, novel protein, all those kinds of buzzwords we hear that we're used to identifying on a bag of dog food, when we can put it in a whole food in that category that kind of gives them some freedom. So for example, if we have a dog, when we talk about managing issues, if they're having chronic GI issues, and I'm sure you guys know the comment is dog doesn't eat, right? So that's a real issue, because now you're worried. Now the dog's vomiting bile, right? This is an issue. So I try to have a client have a couple different options, or they're just picky. They're 16 and a half. Now they're just picky, and that is normal aging, right? So then I want to have a couple options. So maybe I have chicken, turkey, and egg. Or so I have clients, we'll always send for picky dogs. I always say, order 2 different she-dog diets. So we have a couple choices, because that is a normal part of your dog's life. So low fat, we do chicken, turkey, egg. For things like novel protein, we just think of a protein they haven't had before. That's what they mean by novel. So all your IBD, that's why I use pork a lot, is one of our big ones. And then the last thing that I'll say is when they talk about managing GI issues, when the dog is sensitive or has a GI issue, that is not the time to be pulling out lots of carrots and green beans. Because, sometimes dog owners are like, well, feed them carrots and green beans as a whole food. We think healthy is lots of green in our diet. That's how we think of, healthy. But for dogs and cats, cooked food is more gentle. So that's why I say not so much raw vegetable, because that can be a little roughage. If you're trying to lose weight, that's different, but if you're trying to heal the gut, you want gentle, and gentle is cooked. And so I would say, cooked vegetables are okay, but really carbs and meats, mostly meat, is, what is gentle to our dogs. So that's kind of what I would think. I try to give people tools of the ways to manage with whole foods to help their dog's GI.
Yeah, I think those are all great. I think chicken, I always say chicken gets such a bad rap.
Yes.
It's like everyone's sensitive or allergic to chicken. I think it's the number one thing you hear. And,
Yeah.
it can be
Gentle
like,
cheat tonic.
it is. And it's also when you think about like chicken noodle soup, right? Would people crave for like soothing when you're not feeling good? So it
It's
is
gentle.
very gentle. And
Yeah.
as long
Like
as
we hear about clients who always say, I made chicken and rice and my dog was better. And then they go back to the vet and the vet's trying to push them back on the kibble. You know what I mean? That chicken and rice is a cheat tonic, chicken's a cheat tonic. That means gentle it to your stomach.
Yeah. And some of the other like novel proteins, so once again, novels new, rabbit is really nice too. I find it can be harder to find. That's the downside, harder and more expensive. White cod is another one that a lot of pets will take, and using broths. So, having broth on hand, there's a lot of great companies.
Yeah.
if
Well,
you're getting-
we're putting bone broth on She Dog's website. We've got goat's milk now, and then we're also moving to add in bone broth, because that way we can get both spectrum of more moisture and, kind of gentle to the GI tract. But yeah, bone broth is great.
Goat's milk has everything that you need in it. Like
I
it is
love
like
goat's milk.
it's such a good whole food option too for animals, and they could literally live off of it.
Yeah, I do a lot of senior dogs with goat's milk. It's got that natural probiotics, so it's super healthy. It can be, a little bit warming, but for a lot of our seniors, I like it because they need that extra support.
They need that fire stoked. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Dr. Redmond, in terms of some of your strategies. I know you guys are coming up with all sorts of like different kind of protocols and recommendations, especially when you do the testing and you're seeing the results that come back.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, we see results with changes. That's what's great about the testing. It can tell you where you are, but it's not like, oh, they have this and there's nothing I can do. There's everything you can do.
Mm,
So I think making all those changes with diet can have a big impact. Like changing proteins, we've certainly seen that. That's going to make a big impact. Um, and then also feeding to help the gut microbiome, which I think like, may not be the same as feeding people. People are going to eat a bunch of fiber and, you know, bran and all that kind of stuff. But, dogs are going to need the same type of thing, but they do need foods that will help heal, like, build the gut bacteria, prebiotics, probiotics, those kind of things that can help build a good gut bacteria. Because the gut bacteria, what's there, you want a balance of commensal or the good gut bacteria with opportunistics. So if you get an imbalanced gut, you're going to have an increase of things like inflammation or intestinal permeability. So you want to also make sure that you're feeding the gut bacteria that they have.
I think those are all really, really good points. And if you're in a acute situation, right, your dog's not eating, they have active diarrhea, vomiting, this is, the soothing, bland diets are very, very helpful. And then the next phase is like restoring and healing and making sure that we're getting the right foods in that are going to help heal. Like I love using medicinal mushrooms. Cooked mushrooms are very, very powerful. I know I use them a lot with, Dr. Redmond and the innovative pet lab tests, your secretory IgA and that local immune system. If we're having issues, this is where those can be very, very helpful. Your shiitake, your chaga mushrooms are very great at healing. Tremella mushrooms also to help soothe and heal the gut lining from a science perspective and also from a Chinese medicine perspective too.
Yeah, it's
So
great that we love medicine. We love mushrooms. Chinese medicine loves them, and then also Western medicine loves them now. So it's
I know it's great.
a little
Finally,
bit,
right?
a little bit. That's what clients don't make a plate of mushrooms.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, don't overboard. It won't
You
end
have to,
well.
yeah. It's always a little bit, but like we put mushrooms in our earth diet for that purpose. It's because in Chinese medicine, we call it damp draining, right? So it's like anti-cancer properties. And so now in Western medicine sees it too. So it's nice that there's a little bit of kind of coming together.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
I mean, you can see that as anti-inflammatory. And then like you're talking about secretory IgA. So if that's the first, line of defense at the gut lining, you can see, is that really high and there's a bunch of stuff that it's fighting, or is it really low and it's just kind of, they're not fighting at all and they need some support. So
Yeah,
testing can kind of help identify the directions.
I love that. And also too, the reminder, dosing. It's not
Right.
tons of things of one thing. It's like a well-balanced approach like you would take for yourself.
Mhm.
That's really, really important through all of this and through the entire Gut Summit as you learn certain things. It doesn't mean go and buy all the things and then give them all to your dog. It's
Mhm.
literally thinking about, okay, where are things off? How do I support them? How do I heal them? What have I tried? What was that doing? And how does it support and heal? Versus, hearing that someone's dog improved with that supplement and now I should try it. So I come at it more from like the scientific side of things, really thinking about why am I using this and asking that question. Why am I using this food? How is it supporting? How is it helping? Can I improve it? The why question's really, really helpful. I find thinking through those types of things.
I think that's really important too, because a lot of these changes, you don't, make a change in diet and then 2 days later, they're all resolved. I mean, you want to take some time to make these changes and then you want to see how they're working. If you're going to also establish a schedule or different things, I mean, it takes time to get really rolling. And part of it is really paying attention. What's their poop look like? How did they seem today? All those kind of things.
Yeah. A journal's very, very helpful
Hmm.
Yes.
to track trends and then go slow and consistent is really, really helpful. Now, the gut's really important. I think we've all established that and overall wellness. Um, I'd love for us to talk more about how the gut health interconnects with like a dog's overall physical and well-being. So coming down to like the gut brain axis, there's a ton of studies on that, which is great. And it goes back to the original conversation we were having with like stress can also lead to some of these gut health issues. But I'd love to hear Dr. Susan, you talk more about kind of like what you're seeing on your side in terms of gut health and overall wellness.
Well, I mean, of course, we all, know how, and I try to talk to clients about how important it is when you eat today, how you feel today. So it does, your effect on how we eat does impact us over time, right? If I decide to eat McDonald's for 2 years, for the next 2 years, I may not feel it for a couple of months, but I will feel it,
Don't
and
do it, Dr. Susan.
There's a documentary that shows you shouldn't.
He's already
Right.
done it before.
That's
See
true.
how
That's
bad.
true. But it matters how you'll feel better. If I eat better this afternoon, I will feel better tonight. And so that when we talk about gut health and sort of overall well-being, that's true for your dog too. You know what I mean? So we can see it that they feel better when they eat better. And so you will see an improvement in their overall well-being. And those subjective things, how do they act? What's their energy level? But you do see it. And I think that matters so much, not just for their well-being, but also I'm sure, I don't know, there was just a recent study in people showing the connection, which I loved because, again, we're showing Chinese medicine has been right. But it's showing a connection in processed food in people and depression, so they're finding a connection there. And we know, I'm sure, Katie, that we talk about anxiety in dogs being related to what they eat. And so we see that a lot. So there is so much connection between what you put in your gut and your overall well-being, even skin. I mean, skin is so huge and for our dogs, if they're eating processed food, they're having inflammation. It's going to be everywhere in their body, not just in their gut. It goes to their organs and it goes to their skin, and it goes to, it's really impactful throughout their whole life. So I would say I've seen, and this is, again, it's subjective. So, but anecdotally, I've talked to many clients who switching their dog off of processed food, they see a change in their activity, a change in not just their energy level, but the anxiety, kind of those negative behaviors. So that's really important. And it is kind of the things that you can't quite put your finger on, but are true kind of for yourself. You know what I mean? And we can see the same in our dogs because they're mammals like us. What they eat matters.
Yeah, definitely. Betsy, where have you kind of seen some of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think of things that like just the actual supporting good gut bacteria. That's going to have a direct effect on what's happening within the gut. There's a lot of nerves going from the gut to the brain. They're, not at all independent. They're very connected. They're almost best friends. And so, I think of that. So eating right to help with that, the intestinal permeability. If there's increased permeability, you're going to have changes in immune reaction. And it's hard to, that's also going to be related to mood. Because if your gut has to deal with all those things. And then the other thing I think of just with inflammation or digestion is nutrient absorption. If your gut's not really strong, you may not be properly absorbing everything. So it's not, I have a peeve of when they do studies on, we gave, usually it's a human study and they gave people with depression supplement, and then they tried to see, did that make them feel better? But they never do the first thing, like, were they deficient in that supplement in the beginning? So trying to see, like, making sure they have good nutrient absorption and good gut health is going to make sure that they're absorbing those things from the food. So we know nutrients are associated with, mood disorders. And not just, depression, but like anxiety, a lot of dogs are pretty anxious. And if you also have poor absorption and and your dog's magnesium or vitamin D or something is low, that could have an impact.
And, I find really interesting is when we talk about anxiety, Dr. Redmond, a lot of our anxiety prone dogs, we call them our fire constitution dogs. So that's usually not for every dog, but it's usually the Chihuahuas and the Yorkies and the Malteses, a lot of these little, we kind of call them the little yappy dogs, who I love. But those dogs tend to be anxiety dogs and they tend to be our GI dogs, right? Not every time, but so there's a connection there in Chinese medicine because we know, that the fire and the earth elements are connected. So just like you were saying, that connection, the best friend of the brain and the gut, it's just another way to explain kind of how anxiety affects our gut.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I saw a study last week or whenever that they were looking at different size of dog and gut activity. And very large dog, they were more likely to have intestinal permeability. That's the one that I remember. But they have, a lot of things are going to be different based on size, just the intestine itself.
Hmm. I think too, like it goes back to there's leaky gut, like stress is very strongly correlated to leaky gut. So it doesn't always come from the gut and go up. It can also come from the top and go down through that vagus nerve. And
Mhm.
this is where I love everything that both of you have said is that the nutrient absorption, are we nutritional deficient because we're not digesting and absorbing? Do we have a microbiome that's off? Do we have a low grade chronic inflammation that hasn't been resolved or even what we know about? The other thing too that I find gut is directly connected. It's connected to everything. Let's be real, right? Like there's the gut skin axis, the gut brain axis, the gut kidney axis,
Pretty much
like
covered.
all bladder, everything is connected, right? That's the holistic approach. But detox, like the gut is a huge detox organ and it closely works with the liver and the gallbladder and all those other, and the pancreas and all those other areas too for digestion and also getting rid of toxins. And so if our dog's gut is not operating properly or the microbiome is in a state of disarray or dysbiosis and we're lacking diversity, the chance that we're going to build up more toxins that then increases inflammation and then can create more like brain on fire and anxiety issues, like it increases dramatically. And we see a lot of we do heavy metal testing and hair tissue tests, and it is crazy what we see with especially dogs that are showing chronic GI issues and behavior issues, reactivity. Those tests are really helpful and powerful too, and it comes back down to everything that you have all talked about, and being aware of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think of, we look at beta glucuronidase, which is an enzyme that, dogs make, we make it, cats make it, and gut bacteria make it. So if it's really high, it could be an imbalance in gut bacteria. But the problem is it likes to interfere with detoxification. So if that's really high, then things aren't getting escorted out. They're just kind of staying in the gut and getting reabsorbed. So it's concentrating the toxins that are around. So maybe your dog has a terrible gut and you don't think it's a big deal to walk through your neighbor's freshly sprayed yard, but maybe for that dog, it is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Right, just trying
There's
to
a
be
lot of
here.
factors and it can feel overwhelming, right? When you start thinking about all these things. And that's the hard place that so many pet parents are in. But I think it just, it comes back essentially down to those principles we were talking about keeping it simple and just starting with small, simple changes. And that's where the whole food, maybe doing a test versus spending all your money on supplements and we don't even know what's wrong. So those
Right.
things can help you create that foundation. So you're taking those small steps to move forward, to help heal your dog's gut, and keep them
Yeah.
healthy.
We would just to say you can't supplement your way out of a bad diet, right? Because we
Yes.
all I always have a rule. My clients would come to me with, lots of issues with their pets. And so I would say we can give three things, three supplements, and then that's it. We have to pick the top because you can just kind of end up more and more and more. And, just like us, you can take all kinds of vitamins and supplements that if they bother our stomach, then maybe it's not doing what it should. But I did want to make one comment on the organ and detoxification is one thing I do caution because I have a lot of clients, and I'm sure, Dr. Katie, that we like whole foods. So for example, and I always recommend clients to do ground meat because it's easy. And especially if you have a little dog with a little mouth, we have to be careful about the size of those pieces. It's like in our diets, we always use ground meat so that everybody has a small bite. But I do caution a little bit of organ meat if available, but not a lot. And because we worry about, especially in the US, the amount of toxins that are in things like, cow liver and, chicken gizzards and those kinds of things. So we usually try to keep it simple. Like you were saying, just, ground meat and a little bit, maybe one protein, one carb, one veggie to try to test out. It's just a little bit of whole foods, not getting too fancy and not pulling a bunch of organ meat because I worry about a lot of the toxins that could be in that organ meat from that feedlot animal. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sourcing. It's the sourcing to the best of your ability. I think
Yes.
also too, a lot of people say feeding fresh is they can't afford it. And so that's really, really important to be aware of,
Mhm.
especially when you're using organs. But I always think too, like if you can go to the supermarket and buy the meats that you are going to use, even if it's not grass fed and organic, it's still better than like a kibble diet, hands down.
100%.
I mean, it's essentially your animal meats and the rendering process and all of that go into your processed dry food diets. When you start learning about that,
Yeah.
I was appalled as a veterinarian that I
Yeah.
didn't know like that
It was good.
process.
Yeah.
Yeah, I equate it to like just driving through McDonald's every day.
Yeah.
I
Every
think it's
meal.
like
Every
I'd
time
actually
your dog gets kibble, it's like just think you just went through McDonald's.
I think McDonald's is probably better quality, to be honest,
Oh,
than
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
kibble
you
diets. I
could go
hate
anywhere.
saying that.
Yeah, I
But
shouldn't say McDonald's. It's just like fast food in general.
Yeah.
So yes,
You're right. Cause it's not only is the dog food processed, but it's processed from ingredients that were not even acceptable to McDonald's.
yeah, they're feed grade versus
Yeah.
human grade,
Right.
food grade. Very,
Yeah.
very different. And it's something that as a vet, I didn't know this until you started going down the rabbit hole.
Exactly.
So most veterinarians, they're doing the best that they can with the recommendations because they just don't know. And that's why
Yeah.
it's important for everyone here to share this information and help educate and share the resources and the studies that are coming out. Um, and that will help. That will help with the change that we're all looking for. So that's key. And it also leads into, there's a lot of advancements in gut health and research. Dr. Redmond is a part of that, which is fantastic. And what would you say are some of the recent advancements that you're seeing that you're excited about with canine gut health research, that you find like the most promising, or exciting for the future of pet care?
I mean, I think the fact that they're just doing more um, is exciting, and kind of you know looking at defining treatments. Like if this inflammatory marker is elevated, what should you do? What are the things you can do? It's always been pretty laboratory, like we're going to give strong antibiotics or steroids, but you can start with food. And so expanding that kind of stuff, looking to see what's happening there, looking at levels of stress, that's also, and how that impacts animals. And, I think that's exciting. Um, and looking at the impact of not a crazy amount of supplements, like the study we had done where we get, we do the testing, and there's a company that gave some supplements to animals that had a lot of symptoms, and you see changes, you see improvements in symptoms, in testing. So you can see changes, and it's not overwhelming. I will say that it does seem like, I'm sure if that's a pet parent is like, this is a lot. It's really not. And you can go step by step, and you can always just stop where you are and wait till you feel more comfortable to the next move. It's not, one day and then the next.
Good point.
Hmm. What about yourself, Dr. Susan, in terms of
Well,
all the research that's coming out? And
yeah, no, I'm glad that we're just starting to get a little bit. It's been, I think, Chinese medicine's been teaching food therapy for thousands of years, right? So it's the veterinarians who use Chinese medicine and who use holistic medicine. To them, the idea of whole foods is not new. It is new to a lot of only Western trained vets, but I'm so excited that it's actually starting to be something that clients or dog owners know that they can look for, and that there are there are whole food companies, not just Cheetah, but lots of them who are able to supply cooked real food. So that's good. I mean, we just now a couple of years ago, had some studies done that actually showed dogs could eat food, which sadly is literally where it was for medicine. I mean, so there's a lot of ground we have yet to get to, but I think I think there are some studies out in Europe that they're doing that are starting to show a link between processed food and inflammation in the gut. So I'm sure you've probably heard about those, and those are exciting to me, just because it's kind of like the thing that we've known and seen in our practice for so many years, and I've talked to veterinarians who have been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years, right? And they're like, yeah, I knew that back in the 70s when I was, this is how we did it. So really that knowledge it needs to be better understood in Western medicine, or Western veterinary medicine, I should say. And I think it's just starting. I think we've got, so that is heartening, that the idea of feeding, that we're not calling it table scraps anymore. The idea of real food into our dogs' mouths is something that could be good and healthy. So I'm optimistic that we're starting to get there. And I wish we'd gotten there 30 years ago.
Yeah, I think also there's research showing that, processed food's bad for dogs, but there's also research coming out that it doesn't take a whole lot of good food to decrease inflammation. If you end up giving a small percentage in snacks or things, that does make a difference. So if you can't make, whole big changes, giving those snacks or just toppers, those are going to make a difference. I mean, certainly they've been shown to make a difference in research.
Yeah. There's
And
definitely.
how nice for our dogs, right? Because they love it. And,
I know, but they beg, they want the real food, it's tastier than eating cardboard every day. So,
right.
but
It's nice to know that we can give them that. I always say start with the scrambled egg. You can't go wrong, but with the yolk. With the yolk.
With the yolk.
Yes,
Otherwise it's just 17 calories.
That's exactly right. And there's so much research, and for people, there's going to be a lot of talk. We have an entire day on like microbiome and all the advances in that. And we've come such a long way. And there are numerous studies that show that processed food diets they're not as good as a fresh food diet. If we're looking at diversity of microbiome, whether we're looking at inflammation, if we're looking at nutrient absorption. So all these factors, we're starting to be able to back up what we know and what we've been doing for a very long time, because the science is also backing us up. So it's really, really exciting. It's an exciting place to be in. It's exciting for our dogs because it's going to help them thrive and live longer, with less illnesses and less like sick vet visits and expenses, which is, it's no fun going to the vet over and over for sick visits. As a vet, I don't enjoy that. I love seeing people and their pets, but I like it when it's proactive, preventative wellness care.
Right. It hurts us too when we have that to be
sometimes. It's not fun for anyone. So it's really, really exciting. And I hope the pet parents who are joining in on this Dog Gut Summit really dive into the content and take notes and ask those questions, because there's going to be a lot of information that's shared. And it goes back to what we've been talking about, just to kind of summarize everything. There's a lot of information here, and keeping things simple, thinking about food as fresh food, as there's a difference between your kibble processed diets, and human food can be pet food. And it's, shifting that mindset around that and helping to share your success stories with your veterinarians. And as both Dr. Redmond and Dr. Susan talked about, even if it's starting with small things like toppers, your eggs, some freshly cooked vegetables, saving a little bit of the meat that you cooked for yourself without like all the seasonings. I mean, seasonings have a place like herbs and things, but keeping it plain and simple so that you can see that your dog does well when you top that. And eventually you'll probably find that's what your dog wants to eat, and we'll pick that out from the kibble. That was my own personal experience when we transitioned to fresh food. But also too, keeping in mind, if you do have a sick dog who's experiencing some of these gut health issues, utilizing those smaller meals, using nurturing foods, using those broths, using the foods that are bland, that are cooked, that are easier for them to digest. And then really taking advantage of a lot of these functional medicine tests that we have, so you don't have to guess anymore, where you can get a better idea of where things might be off, or, hey, this is working, let's keep on this path. So really sticking to those principles and going back to those foundations can really help reduce that overwhelm and the fear that a lot of pet parents experience. And if you're watching and that's you, you may be feeling that too. So thank you so much, Dr. Redmond and Dr. Susan, for joining us and sharing all this valuable information and tools and resources, and also too for the amazing companies that you have built. I have used both of your companies personally. I absolutely love what you have done and the results that you get and help me get for my own patients. So thank you so much for everything that you do. And I'm really excited to hear both of your presentations that are coming up in the Dog Gut Summit. So this is a small snippet of what is coming. And it's really important. Our Dog Gut Summit is starting tomorrow. This is just a small part of all the information, resources, tools, speakers that you're going to hear from on how to really optimize and improve your dog's gut health. So make sure that you share this with other pet parents, especially if they have a dog that might be struggling and they're going back and forth to the vet and they're finding they're not getting the right answers or results that they want. This is the time to share the Dog Gut Summit with them. It's an amazing resource that you can always refer back to. So make sure you join me. And also, too, we're going to have a really amazing special workshop if you want to dive deeper with me on how to really help heal your dog's gut. So stay tuned for more information about that. And once again, thank you, Dr. Redmond. Thank you, Dr. Susan. You both are amazing. And thank you for being a part of the Incredible Dog Gut Summit.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. It was fun.